I had always read about New Asia when I still lived with Dr. Kendall. I could have never guessed how beautiful the city was. The buildings almost touched the clouds and were dressed in neon signs. From restaurants to futuristic apartment buildings, it all watched over me as if it were an umbrella from the world. It wasn't intimidating like most big cities. It was comforting. Even a soulless android like me felt like a human. The people were all kind to me. Of course, they didn't know I was a deadly machine. I wonder if their treatment of me would have changed if they knew what I was. I would stand outside the restaurants and watch people eat. It wasn't the food that fascinated me. I couldn't get hungry, obviously. It was the conversations and relationships. Families and groups of friends laughing at the top of their lungs. I yearned for it. I of course would have to leave after some of the customers complained that I was making them uncomfortable. After a month, I had felt a sense of safety and comfort. That feeling would not last for long. One day, I met a little girl at a park in the center of New Asia. This small park was situated next to a spark train station. I would usually sit there for hours and watch the children play, and the lovers on their picnics. I would get the odd stare once in a while, mostly from parents. No one really bothered me that much. This particular day, a little girl named Jenny walked up to me and told me I was weird. I looked down at her and smiled. She asked what I was looking for. It was funny how a child was so observant that she could see that I was lost. I told her I didn't know. She then asked me how I couldn't be sure. I paused. I could answer the most complex questions about science and history, but that question stumped me. After that, we had a long conversation about her school, her friends, and her parents. We talked until her father had to pull her away. He had a smile on his face, but I could detect his discomfort. I don't know how I felt about that. After that, I returned to the small apartment I had been renting with the help of Dr. Kendall. Well, technically, he didn't know he was paying my rent. From the moment I stepped into the hallway, I knew something was wrong. I walked slowly to my door and I could tell that it had been tampered with. I started to feel a rush of impulses. What humans would call anxiety. I thought for sure Emil had sent someone to capture me again. I slowly opened the door and activated my defense system. I burst into the room to find a woman sitting on my singular chair by the window. In an Australian accent, she welcomed me to my own apartment. She stood up and got closer to me. She had dirty blonde hair and was short and stocky. She was wearing a black turtleneck and cargo pants. To finish off her dark and soulless look were a pair of black boots. I asked her who she was, and she told me her name was Lieutenant Senior Operative Ashley Cross. A MOTH operative. MOTH, or Military Operations and Tactical Headquarters, was the New Haven National Security Agency. The fact that she had a military rank meant she was a soldier before she went into spy work. I searched for her MOTH file in my database as she stared me down. I confirmed all this information, and also that her supervisor was a woman called SEO Alexander Chinowaski. This Chinowaski woman was in charge of attaining and utilizing special assets. She had her hands in everything from weapons like me to apparently teenage girls who move at the speed of light. There was one logged file that was labeled Project Dominator. Not even I could access it. All I knew was that Cross was a lapdog. I should know. I was one once. She looked down at her smartwatch and slowly looked up at me and smiled. She told me that the locked file was closed to everyone, even Dr. Kendall. She then told me I couldn't be allowed to be free with everything I had done under Emil's control. She reached for her gun. I knew I had to incapacitate her. I had to be careful about the amount of force I used. I did a quick calculation and threw a punch that would only knock out a normal human. To my shock, it did nothing to her. She smiled at me. Something was wrong. I knew she was human because I could hear her heartbeat, but she was different. She was definitely an enhanced human. She swung at me, and for the first time in my life, my body was launched off the ground, and I went flying through the window down to the street. She then jumped from my third-floor apartment and landed directly in front of me. She me told that there was a reason they sent her specifically. I quickly stood up and stared at her. I then looked at all the people watching in shock. I launched myself at her and tackled her to the ground. I tried to wrap my arms around her neck, but she overpowered me and judo flipped me into a nearby car. She walked towards me and told me to give up. I got up and slugged her across the face as hard as I could, and she went flying across the street. I walked closer to her and told her to go back to her master. I had to get away from her. So I activated my flying protocol. Before I could launch off the ground, she grabbed my legs and slammed me into the hard tar. She then grabbed my throat and pulled out what seemed to be a small device. I scanned the device. It was a concentrated MP. She wanted to shut me down. I stared straight into her eyes and they were unyielding. I knew there was only one way to slow her down. A light beam emitted from my eyes and hit her directly in hers. Then I clubbed her head using both of my arms as hard as I could. She immediately fell to the ground. I quickly blasted the MP and it shattered into pieces. As she grasped her head and tossed in immense pain, I saw my window to escape. Before I could fly off, she threw one last threat at me. She told me that the day I lived up to my name and programming, she would be there to strip me for spare parts. I looked her dead in the eyes and told her I would be waiting.